This is a podcast for anyone who has ever looked at the life they built, the house, the children, the calendar, the school bags by the door, the messages waiting to be answered, the dinner half made on the bench, and wondered quietly, how did we get here? I'm Gabriella Pomare, family lawyer, author, mother, and co parent. And in this space, we talk about the conversations people usually have too late, the silence before separation, the invisible load, the resentment under I'm fine, the loneliness inside a shared life, the reality of co parenting, and the possibility of rebuilding with more honesty, dignity, and care. This podcast is not about perfect families, it is about conscious ones. For the before, for the break, for the becoming. Let's begin.
So, today we are going to talk about affairs. But not only the version of an affair we all understand after the damage is obvious. Not just the hotel room, not just the confession, not just the screenshot, not just the message that confirms what your body has already started to suspect. I want to talk about the stage before that, the part that's harder to prove, but often much easier to feel. The stage where maybe nothing physical has happened yet, or maybe it has and you don't know that yet. And what you're living with instead is this strange change in the air at home, this new charge around someone's phone, this new impatience, this new distance, this new version of your partner who is still coming home, but somehow not arriving in the same way. Because the reality is that affairs don't always start with sex or intimacy. Sometimes they start with energy. Sometimes they start with a message that goes on too long. Sometimes they start with a colleague who just gets it. Sometimes they start with a work wife or a work husband, a friend, a person in the DMs, someone who laughs at the right time or replies quickly or remembers the details, compliments the new shirt or notices the mood or makes your partner feel interesting or alive again. And then slowly, the emotional center of the relationship starts to move. The first update goes somewhere else. The good mood goes somewhere else. The jokes start going somewhere else. The excitement goes somewhere else. The person at home gets the exhausted version, the irritated version, the version that says, I'm tired, or nothing happened today, or why are you asking? You're being paranoid. And that is why emotional affairs can feel almost worse than physical affairs in some ways, because they keep you trapped in the grey. With a physical affair, once it's known, there's at least a line that most people understand. But with an emotional affair, you can spend months being told that nothing is happening while everything in your body knows that something is. And that is the part that breaks people, not only the other person, the denial, the minimizing, the lying, the way you start questioning yourself, the way you become someone that you don't recognize, someone who's noticing the phone, the tone, the extra drink, the new shirt, the sudden late night meeting, the change in perfume, the laugh at a message when it arrives, the way their face lights up and then closes when they realize that you saw. And you hate that version of yourself. You think, I don't want to be this person. I don't know who this person is. I don't want to be someone who cares where their phone is. I don't want to be someone who feels sick when a name pops up. I don't want to be someone lying awake at 3 a.m. trying to work out whether I'm intuitive or I'm insane. But that is what happens when reality starts to split. Your body starts looking for the truth because your life has stopped making sense. And often the first thing that changes is the phone. The phone becomes different. It used to sit on the bench. It used to be face up. It used to be part of the ordinary clutter of the house, beside the keys and the water bottles and the receipts and the half opened mail. And then suddenly it goes everywhere. Bathroom, bedroom, laundry, garage, car. It's face down on the table. It's angled away. It's picked up faster. It's locked faster. It's checked more often, but somehow less openly. And when you ask, even gently, oh, who's that? The answer comes with pure irritation. Just work, no one. Why are you asking? And suddenly your question is treated like the problem. That is often one of the first fractures. The person noticing the shift is no longer allowed to notice. You're not being reassured, you're being repositioned as insecure. And then the patterns start changing. Extra drinks after work, late night meetings, new effort around appearance, more going out, more networking, more need for space, more vague explanations, more defensiveness around ordinary questions. And the hard part is that each thing on its own, yeah, can be explained. I mean, people are allowed to work late. People are allowed to go out. People are allowed to dress well. People are allowed friends and people are allowed privacy. But when all of it starts forming a pattern and the pattern is denied, that is when you start feeling like you are living in two realities: the reality you're told and the reality that you can feel. And this is where the work wife or work husband becomes complicated, because at first it can sound harmless, even funny. Someone at work who understands the pressure, someone who knows the deadlines, the personalities, the politics, the stress, someone who sees the competent, polished, impressive version of your partner, not the tired person standing in the kitchen at 8:17 p.m. being asked about bins or bills, homework, dinner, family, obligations, and all the unglamorous machinery of adult life. And I get why that can feel intoxicating. It's nice to be seen outside the boring version of yourself. It's nice to be admired without being needed. And it's nice to be funny without having to unpack the dishwasher afterwards. It's nice to be wanted in a room where no one's annoyed that, hey, you forgot something. And that is how emotional affairs often begin. Not because someone wakes up and says, I want to destroy my marriage, but because someone starts enjoying a version of themselves that feels lighter somewhere else. I mean, think about the bridges of Madison County. That story still stays with people because it captures something pretty uncomfortable: the ache of being seen by someone outside of life that swallowed you. It's not simple or clean. It's longing, it's loneliness, it's duty, desire, the fantasy of being met as a person rather than as a role. What about Lost in Translation, where two lonely people find this private language together inside lives that feel muted and disconnected? Again, the point's not that every connection outside of a relationship is wrong. It's not. The point is that these stories stay with us because we understand how powerful it can be to feel awake with someone when your real life has really started to fall asleep. And that's the danger. The outside person doesn't have to carry the mortgage. They don't have to know the history. They don't have to sit inside the same unresolved argument that you've been having for 5 years. They're not asking about the groceries and they haven't seen you at your worst. They get the selected version, the lit up version, the easier version. And if you start comparing that fantasy to the full weight of a real marriage, the marriage will almost always lose. Not because the fantasy is deeper, but because it's not had to survive real life. And that's often when the person having the emotional affair becomes negative at home. They become colder, more impatient, more critical, more easily irritated. They start rewriting their relationship. You know, we haven't been happy for years. You never understand me. You're always negative. You're too much. You always have a problem. And sometimes there might be truth in that. Maybe the relationship has been hard. Maybe there has been loneliness or resentment or disconnection, exhaustion, conflict, unmet needs. Affairs don't always happen in happy, connected relationships. But pain in a relationship is not a license to create a private emotional life somewhere else and then punish your partner for noticing. That's the line. Because what often happens is the person moving toward the affair needs the marriage to become worse in their mind so that the outside connection can feel more innocent. They need the partner at home to become the problem so the person outside the relationship can become the escape. They start building a case against their marriage to justify their energy that they're putting elsewhere. And the person at home can often feel that. They can feel that they're no longer just competing with another person. They're competing with a whole story, a story where they are difficult, a story where their marriage was already dead, a story where the affair is not betrayal, but rescue. And that is brutal because one person is rewriting the marriage to justify leaving emotionally, and the other person is still landing inside the marriage, trying to understand when the story changed. And that's what happens when emotional affairs begin to fracture a relationship. It's not just secrecy, it's not just attraction, it's the slow rewriting of reality. I mean, Princess Diana's line, there were three of us in this marriage, still lands because it captures that feeling exactly. It's not only about physical betrayal, it's the feeling that the private space between two people is no longer private, that someone else has entered the room before the relationship has officially ended. And when that happens, home starts to feel crowded even when there are only two people in it. You can be sitting beside someone on the couch and still feel like someone else is there. You can be in the same bed and feel the distance. You can be having a normal conversation and sense that part of them is waiting for another message, another reply, another moment with someone else. I mean, that is the modern affair. It's not always lipstick on a collar. Sometimes it's just a phone lighting up in the dark. Sometimes it's the private joke. Sometimes it's the sudden silence when you walk into the room. Sometimes it's the "we're just friends" said with too much anger. And that is what makes DMs so dangerous. They create a second room inside the relationship, a room where someone can be warmer and funnier and more flirtatious and more responsive and more alive than they are at home. A room where the affair can begin before anyone calls it an affair. A room where someone can tell themselves that it doesn't count because they haven't touched. But messages are not nothing. Messages can be rehearsal. Messages can be emotional access. I mean, messages can be secrecy. Messages can be the place desire begins before the body follows. I mean, that is why the Adam Levine DM story became so viral. People weren't only talking about whether there was a physical affair, they were talking about tone, attention, flirtation, humiliation, ego, secrecy, and this very modern question: what counts as betrayal when the issue isn't a hotel room, but a private message? Because a person can be physically beside you and emotionally performing to someone else. They can be in the same house, but more alive in someone else's inbox. They can be at family dinner and waiting for someone else to reply. And the partner often feels it before they can prove it. That feeling can become physical. You know, the stomach drop when the phone lights up, the heat in your chest when the name is mentioned, the throat closing when they say you are overreacting, the shaking after a conversation that gives you no answers, or the 3 a.m. wake up where your mind starts replaying everything: the scanning, the watching, the embarrassment of becoming hyper alert, the shame of thinking, why am I like this? But maybe you're like this because something is wrong. Maybe your body's not being dramatic. Maybe your body is trying to keep you safe inside a reality that no longer matches what you're being told. And this is where the lying often hurts just as much as the affair itself, and sometimes more. Because the person may say nothing happened, but what they really mean is nothing happened that you can prove. They may say, I didn't lie, when what they mean is I left out the part that would have mattered. And they might say, I deleted it because I knew you would react, as if your reaction to the truth is the problem rather than their decision to hide it. And they may say you're insecure when what they mean is your intuition is getting too close. That is what breaks trust. Not only the outside person, the way the truth is managed, the way the person at home is made to doubt themselves, the way the person having the affair gives just enough information to stay technically innocent and withholds enough to keep the private world alive. And when the emotional affair becomes physical, when it already has, and you're only beginning to feel the shift at home, often the signs get sharper. There's less touch or touch that feels strange, less eye contact, less patience, more sudden showers, more vague explanations, and more over explaining one thing and under explaining another. There's more criticism, more defensiveness, more distance. And sometimes, confusingly, there's even more affection for a short time, but it feels guilty rather than present, like someone trying to cover the smell of smoke without admitting that there's a fire. And intimacy can change too. Less intimacy, avoidance of intimacy, different intimacy, intimacy that feels disconnected, or a suddenness around intimacy that doesn't feel like closeness, but actually like guilt, comparison, or performance. And the person at home feels the humiliation of that before they know the facts. They feel the absence, they feel the comparison, they feel the strange sense that someone else has entered the room when no one says their name. That's why emotional and physical affairs aren't always separate. They often bleed into each other. The emotional affair creates the private world, and the private world creates secrecy. And secrecy creates distance at home. And distance at home creates justification, and justification creates permission. And the physical affair becomes the next step in a story the person had already been writing privately. I mean, Beyonce's Lemonade. That song captured the emotional landscape of this so powerfully because it wasn't just about betrayal as an event. It was about suspicion and rage, indignity, humiliation, survival. The question of whether to stay, the question of whether repair is possible, and the strange discipline of appearing composed while privately being on fire. And I think that's why betrayal music cuts through. I mean, Shakira's music after her separation had that same electricity because people understood the feeling of talking humiliation. I mean, Shakira's music after her separation had that same electricity because people understood the feeling of taking humiliation and turning it into language. Taking the thing that could have made you feel small and making it impossible to ignore. And Taylor Swift's breakup songs, I mean, they have that forensic quality because heartbreak often lives in details. The scar, the kitchen, the call that didn't come, that tiny thing that later becomes the whole story. That is what betrayal does. It gives meaning to details you wish had stayed meaningless. And I guess from the other side, I also think we need to talk about why the person having the affair can become so defensive or negative or cruel, because they often don't experience themselves as cruel. They may experience themselves as lonely or unseen or alive for the first time in years, wanted, appreciated, understood. They may feel guilty, but they may also resent that guilt because it interrupts the only thing that has made them feel good in a really long time. So the mind protects the fantasy. It builds a case. We were already unhappy. She never understood me. I deserve to feel alive, or it's just a friendship. He's really controlling. If they were easier to talk to, I wouldn't need this. And maybe there are grains of truth in some of that. Maybe the marriage was lonely. Maybe there were real issues, and maybe both people were hurt. But the danger is when pain becomes the permission slip. Being lonely doesn't make secrecy honest, and feeling unseen doesn't make lying harmless. Wanting to feel alive doesn't make someone else's reality irrelevant. This is where many marriages fracture before the affair is even discovered. One person is rewriting the marriage to justify the affair, and the other person is fighting not only for the relationship, but for the truth of what the relationship has been. One says, "We were never happy," and the other thinks, "That's not true. We had problems, but you're erasing the good so that you can live with what you're doing." One says, "You pushed me away," and the other one thinks, "I was asking you to come closer for years." One says, "You're just insecure," and the other one thinks, "No, I'm reacting to something that you are refusing to name." And suddenly the marriage is not only dealing with an affair, it's dealing with a war over reality. And that is what breaks people. Not just the betrayal, but the reality war. The argument over whether the person who noticed was allowed to notice. The argument over whether the relationship was really as bad as the person now says. The argument over whether nothing happened means anything when everything feels different. So, if there is going to be repair, it cannot begin with the narrowest possible defense. It cannot begin with, "But I never touched them." It cannot begin with, "It was just messages." It cannot begin with, "You made me lonely." It cannot begin with, "I deleted it because I knew you would react." It has to begin with the end of minimizing. And something more honest has to come into the room. I can see that I've moved emotionally towards someone else and away from you. I can see that I protected that connection at the expense of your safety. I can see that even if I didn't think of it as an affair, it changed the emotional reality of our relationship. And I understand the lying and the minimizing may have hurt as much as the connection itself. That is not the end of repair, though. That really is the beginning. Because repair is not the apology. Repair is the behavior after the apology. Repair is telling the truth without making the other person extract it piece by piece. Repair is ending the secrecy, not just pausing until the crisis passes. Repair is not making your shame the center of their pain. Repair is not expecting trust to come back because you're tired of feeling guilty. Repair is consistency, boring consistency, the kind that doesn't need applause, the kind that slowly teaches the body, maybe I don't have to keep looking for the truth. But not every affair can be repaired, emotional or physical. Some reveal a pattern that's not safe. Some people want forgiveness, but not accountability. Some people want the marriage and the affair energy. Some people want the comfort of home, but the thrill elsewhere. And some people only admit what has already been discovered. And sometimes the most important thing is not to keep understanding why they did it. Sometimes it's to stop abandoning yourself while they explain it. Because the person at home often starts doing so much work to understand the affair that they forget to ask whether the person who caused the wound is doing enough work to become safe again. Understanding is not excusing, and empathy is not self abandonment. Repair does require two people, not one person bleeding while the other explains why they were holding the knife. So maybe the question before the affair is not only would I ever cheat, maybe it's where does my emotional energy go when my relationship feels hard? Do I bring loneliness into the relationship, or do I take it somewhere more flattering? Do I tell the truth when attraction appears, or do I protect the spark because it makes me feel alive? Do I become cool at home to justify being warm elsewhere? Do I call something friendship because affair sounds too ugly? And do I make my partner feel insecure for noticing what I know has a charge? And if you're the person feeling something is off, maybe the question isn't, how do I prove it? Maybe the question is, can I speak about what I feel without being punished for feeling it? Because the answer will tell you something. If your partner can meet your discomfort with curiosity, there's a possibility for truth. If your partner can say, I can understand why that would make you feel uncomfortable, let's talk about it, there can still be a bridge. But if every question becomes an attack and every concern becomes your insecurity and every feeling becomes your fault, every attempt to understand becomes evidence that you're controlling, then the issue is no longer only the person outside the relationship. The issue is the truth is no longer safe inside it. And that's what happens before it breaks. Sometimes the affair is not the first betrayal. Sometimes it's the final proof. This is Before It Breaks with Gabriella Pomare. If this episode gave language to something that you've been feeling or helped you see a relationship, a family dynamic, a conflict, or a quiet part of your own life differently, I hope that you take that gently with you this week. These conversations are not always easy, but they matter because so much of what happens in relationships and families begins long before anyone else can see it. Before the decision, before the separation, before the conflict becomes the only language, before the break. And sometimes when we're brave enough to tell the truth earlier, we can repair and rebuild, reconnect, or at least move through change with more honesty, dignity, and care. For the before, for the break, for the becoming. I'm Gabriella Pomare, and this is Before It Breaks.